Something crazy happened when I was on the subway. I was living in the suburbs of New York, and the only sensible way to get to work was to take the subway into the city. To drive a car into Manhattan was insane. The traffic and trying to park was a nightmare. So I got used to my routine on the train, so much so that I barely paid attention to anyone else riding with me. But there was this one girl who always caught my eye. She was probably in her mid-20s and had a really unique sense of style. It was like a mix of thrift shop finds and something that could have been pulled from a fashion magazine. Every morning, without fail, she'd sit across from me with a book open on her lap and earbuds in her ears, completely absorbed in her own world. It was like she was in this bubble, and everything outside was just noise. Her clothes had this light smell of incense, mixed with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was a nice scent that made me wonder about her. What was her story? Was she a poet or an artist? Or maybe someone who just found comfort in the pages of books? One day I finally mustered up some courage and asked her what she was reading. As the train rattled along, she looked up at me, her eyes meeting mine for just a moment. Then she gave me this small, mysterious smile. "It's a collection of short stories," she said, showing me the cover. Some of them are pretty intense. Her accent was soft, but there was something intriguing about it, like it whispered of far-off places I hadn't been. Just then the train screeched to a halt, and the lights flickered, casting weird shadows all around. The girl closed her book, her smile disappearing as she surveyed the surroundings. I could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't like the usual hustle and bustle of morning riders chattering away. It turned quiet, and I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I glanced around and noticed her fingers nervously fiddling with her shirt hem, which was a big contrast to the calm vibe she usually had. Then, out of nowhere, the intercom crackled and the conductor's voice broke through the stillness. "We're experiencing a temporary delay. Please remain seated and do not attempt to leave the train." Right then, a guy sitting across from me stood up and looked really agitated. He seemed on edge, mumbling something to himself that I couldn't quite catch. I caught a glimpse of something shiny in his pocket, and my heart raced as I thought, "Uh-oh, are we in trouble here?" We were stuck in this metal tube under the city with no way out, and I could feel fear creeping in. I couldn't shake the worry that we were in for a real-life horror show. Noticing my nervousness, the girl leaned forward and whispered, "Don't worry." Her voice was surprisingly calming. The lights flickered again and the emergency lights kicked on, giving the car a dull, red glow. The whispers around us became louder. People were getting anxious and some were on their phones trying to figure out what was going on. Then someone in the back started screaming. Panic filled the train. The guy who'd been pacing around started to look really frantic. But the girl stayed calm, her eyes fixed on him with surprising intensity. As the screams got louder, the girl stood up, her book slipping from her grasp and hitting the floor with a thud. The guy stopped pacing, hovering his hand over his pocket. "Let's not do anything hasty," she said, her voice low but steady. With that, the air felt heavy, like everything was about to explode. Just at that moment, the train jolted back into motion, which sent a couple of passengers stumbling. The guy took his chance then and pulled out a knife, its blade gleaming ominously in the emergency light. But what happened next was wild. The girl moved quicker than you'd think possible, grabbing his wrist like a vice. "I don't think so," she said, her expression shifting to something fierce. He tried to fight back, but she was surprisingly strong. Everyone else on the train was frozen in shock. She tightened her grip, and the guy started to wince in pain. The knife clattered to the ground. "What are you?" he gasped. She leaned in closer, not dropping her smile. Just then, we all heard weird sounds echoing through the tunnels outside, like something unnatural was moving out there. The train raced faster through the darkness, and the girl's grip on the man was like steel. "We're not the only ones with stories down here," she whispered. Out of nowhere, the emergency lights went off and we were surrounded by darkness. Then there was this blinding light followed by a blood-curdling scream that seemed to come from deep below the earth. Suddenly the train jerked again, and it just kept moving. It was pitch black, and all we could hear were gasps and those strange whispers getting louder. The red lights flicked back on just as we screeched to a stop at the next station. The guy who had the knife, he was gone, like he had just vanished into thin air. The doors to our car swung open. The girl stepped out, her eyes scanning the platform like she was looking for something. "This is as far as I go," she said, catching her breath. "Tell no one what you saw." I just stared at her, my mind racing. "What are you?" I managed to ask. And then she was gone, disappearing into the shadows, leaving behind nothing but the echoes of her footsteps and those fading whispers. I climbed up the stairs, my hands shaking, and stepped out into the blinding daylight. The city was a bustling chaos up above, but I had a feeling that the real terrors lurked beneath, hidden in the darkness of the subway tunnels. I glanced back at the subway grate, unsure if I'd ever be able to ride the train again without thinking about that mysterious girl and the unsettling secrets lying in the dark below.